All right, folks, welcome back to the next installment in our 2025 Giving Tuesday lineup here at the Rough Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society. My name is Carl Malcolm. I serve as Vice President of Conservation for RGS and AWS. I have the pleasure of being the host today for a series of conversations spanning our 6 regions with key leaders from each of those regions. So, our next stop on the map, we're going to be taking a trip down to, do you guys like Southern Appalachian or Southern Appalachian? Any strong preference here? I don't want to get you in trouble.
Well,
As a
down here,
Midwesterner, what should I call it?
I would go
Oh, I certainly
Appalachian.
have.
Go
Oh, yeah.
Appalachian? All
Yeah.
right.
Strong preference here,
All right.
personally.
All right.
Appalachian all the
I
way.
don't feel like I've got a strong dog in the fight. So I'm gonna do whatever the local boys tell me is what I'm gonna lean towards. So Southern Appalachian region. We've got Sean and Ben here. They're going to be giving us some updates, giving us a little run through of accomplishments, things they're excited about, things on the horizon, key partnerships, that sort of a deal. But we do want this to be as interactive as possible, so we can take this conversation in any direction of interest to our friends in the audience as well. So if you've got a question, if you've got comments, you've got those functionalities here in the Crowdcast environment. Please let us know what you are most interested in talking about with Ben and Sean. I also just want to lead off with a note of appreciation for all of you for taking the time to be here and also for being part of our RGS and AWS community. The work that we are highlighting today throughout Giving Tuesday, none of it is possible. The organization is not possible without the passion and commitment of a whole community. And now we're talking like generations of people who have been supporting our mission of trying to take care of these forests, trying to be stewards of habitat for these amazing species that are important for so many reasons. And the forests, of course, have importance that go far beyond just thinking about grouse and woodcock, as much as all of us love thinking about those two species. So we appreciate everything that you all do, with special thanks to our volunteers, our chapter leaders, our membership, and folks who are donating to the cause as well. And if you want to jump in front of the holiday gift giving season and grab memberships for friends or family, or if yours maybe is out of date, you can follow the Giving Tuesday link here in Crowdcast. Update memberships, check out the merchandise, make a donation, anything like that. Today is all about trying to build community and further support for mission delivery. So before we jump into the work, gentlemen, part of what I want to accomplish today is just trying to highlight the quality human beings we have working for this organization and give people a sense of who we are as people. So not just like jumping into where do we have great habitat work happening, but a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to start with you, Sean, and just ask for a little bit of background on what brought you to this organization. I know you deal with all kinds of sticky issues with contracts and trying to keep work happening on the ground, where sometimes it can, there can be some headaches involved. But what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning to be part of this team trying to help deliver the mission of this organization? So give us a little personal insight for starters.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So, Sean Berry, Forest Conservation Director for the Southern Appalachian region, and for us, that's Southwest Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So I get to work with a group of about 9 other conservation folks in our region, which I'll get to in a little bit, but lots of exciting stuff happening. I would say, in terms of what keeps me motivated, is the mission and feeling a connection to the places where we live and work. And so for me, my introduction to natural resources and natural resource management was when I was a kid, and having an instrumental grandfather who really believed in conservation, who taught me about the land and who taught me about what it means to be a part of it. And so I always had that strong influence growing up, and we all chipped in to help manage our family's hunting camp, and grew up doing a lot of turkey and deer and quail hunting. And so that foundation has stuck with me. And I think what's interesting about RGS and AWS, especially in the Southern Apps, is that our work is more critical now than ever. We've seen, as I'll get into, steep declines with grouse populations in our area, and a lot of that relates to a lack of active forest management and sustainable management. And so we have a lot of problems to solve, and that's what keeps me motivated to come and leave the world a better place for my kids and for the generations to follow. So that's what keeps me excited about the work that we're doing at RGS with a bunch of other partners as well.
Love it, man. I'm imagining if your grandpa were listening to this right now, he'd probably be pretty happy to hear that those seeds he planted early on are bearing such fruit. Sean, that's awesome. Ben, how about you? Tell us a little bit about outside of work. What makes you tick? Like what brings you to this position, and tell us about the position too. Just give us a little intro.
Sure thing. So I'm Ben Rhodes. I'm the Southern Appalachians Forest Conservation Coordinator. So that makes me Sean's second in command. And so my job really is about bridging the gap between Sean at the program level and our state level foresters, the forest wildlife specialists who are really on the ground making all this work happen. So I'm trying my best to support both sides, both with the administrative stuff like contracts, helping Sean write the contracts, and then all the way down to the ground level, helping the specialists implement the contracts and everything in between. So that's where I fit into the whole equation. In terms of what makes me tick, what gets me up in the mornings, well, I guess going back in the day, like Sean, I was also inspired by my grandfather as well as my mother. Grew up in Western North Carolina, up in the mountains, did a lot of hiking and camping. And I guess early on, without really knowing what I was looking at, I always just loved looking out over big, wild landscapes, not little individual clumps of trees, but getting up on top of the mountain, looking out over the whole landscape. And gradually, as I've learned more and more, I've traveled around, worked a few different places, but ended up coming home to the Appalachians, um, in part because of the real diversity of ecosystems and landscapes that we have here, and the thing that I really probably love most about working at RGS is the fact that we are doing our best to work at scales that matter across these whole landscapes, preserving not just individual bits of the mountains that I call home, but the whole area. So that's my big thing.
Love that, man. Talking a personal story that brings it at scale. Those are a couple of words that we were just chatting about on the conversation with the Mid-Atlantic region, this idea of trying to figure out, and this is not taking anything away from all of the wonderful projects that have been executed through our organization, through a number of partnerships over the years where we're looking at like opportunities at the scale of tens of acres, right? Like that's good. That's good. And given the issues that we have in terms of forest health and the conservation of these species and all of their co-inhabitants, we're continuing to see declines in the distribution and abundance of both ruffed grouse and American woodcock. So we haven't been winning the day, right? Like we've got to figure out how to get to the Ben Rhodes view of being up in like the top of a tall tree on the top of a tall mountain, looking out and seeing some dynamic forest restoration blocks scattered across the landscape, right? Some habitat complexity. So love the fact that you've been thinking at scale since the time you were there at your grandpa's side. it's like, so we're gonna have some calls to action for folks today, but those two intros, like one of the calls to action is if you've got impressionable kids in your life, whether they're nieces, nephews, your own kids, grandkids, the neighbor kid, if you're around kids, like listen to these two guys right here. Those early interactions, man, they make a huge difference. And probably all of us have those stories about people who put us on a journey towards time in the woods. So part of our call to action today is have a positive impression on a kid with respect to great outdoors and nature. Gentlemen, I know the two of you prepared some content to share with the audience here today. You want to jump in and share some visuals and talk us through some of the updates, and then a reminder to our audience all along the way, I'm paying attention to the Q&A box. I'm paying attention to the chat box. If you see something that interests you or you have questions about, feel free to chime in. Feel free to throw a question in there, and we will work those in over the course of the presentation. So you don't have to hold on to them to the end. Just jump in. This is interactive. This is informal and in service to all of you. So please take advantage. Sean, Ben, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks for the intro, Carl. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again for everyone who's joining us today. As Carl mentioned, our members are the backbone of what we do and have a rich history within the organization. So just wanted to take some time to go over at a high level some things going on in the Southern Appalachians program. So we'll talk a little bit about just the state of grouse, state by state updates, some things that we're trying to do, and also talk a little bit about what we're doing on the ground when it comes to planning and implementation. And so I'll have Ben go to the next slide. And we will just kick things off with a team intro. So these are our 10 staff here in the region working on a combination of private, state, and federal lands. So we have folks that are working as all lands foresters, where they're working with private landowners, state, and federal agencies. We have others that are just focused on private lands. We have some that are focused just on federal lands. So a real combination of folks with different skill sets working at a landscape scale to try to implement the work that we're doing. And I'll just shout out that Ben has been a great coordinator for us in the region. I used to be our coordinator for the region and stepped into the director role with Nick B. Miller's departure. But Ben was our forest wildlife specialist in Kentucky for a couple of years prior to being a coordinator, and so he really has that sense for what happens on the ground and bridging that at the program level. So I will just say Ben's been a great asset to our team, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with him. Next slide, Ben. So a lot of you have probably seen this slide or have heard about these things as it relates to rough grouse. So we know through the Eastern Grouse Working Group that rough grouse have declined by roughly 71% since 1989. We know that the primary driver of this decline is a lack of young forest, so forest in the 5 to 20 year age class. And so that is the primary driver of their decline. But we also know that there's a lot of other secondary drivers as well. And so some of those secondary drivers are parcelization. So, private lands becoming more parcelized and less cohesive. Development is also an issue. So, urban sprawl, building strip malls, clear cutting, and then putting apartments up. These are all things that negatively impact grouse and a lot of other wildlife as well. We know that there are some concerns about West Nile virus in rough grouse. We know that there are also concerns about warming trends, which might be pushing grouse up to higher elevations. And so there's a number of things going on here with grouse declines, but the primary driver is that lack of young forest habitat. And so it's not just about having young forest, it's also about what we call an interspersion and juxtaposition of these young forest patches. And so having connective patches that these birds can use throughout different life stages is really critical. And so what we're trying to do is to create more diverse forests. And so to create more diverse forests, we need a combination of early, mid, and late successional forest characteristics on the landscape. The one we really push for is early succession because that's the one that is most lacking on the landscape. But that's not to say that you won't find grouse in other age classes as well throughout different times of the year. We also like to prioritize high elevation areas generally in the Southern Appalachians. That is a little bit varied as we get over into Kentucky and Tennessee on the Cumberland Plateau, where we might be doing some management a little bit lower than 2,000 feet. Typically, we're going to push for the mid to high elevations in the Blue Ridge above 2,000 and ideally much higher than that. And what we try to do is to focus on more mesic forest types with an emphasis on oak. However, we are doing management across different forest types to create the conditions necessary for grouse and other wildlife. So we look at grouse as our indicator species of healthy, resilient, diverse forests. There are canary in a coal mine. And interestingly, we also look at them as an umbrella species. So we see that grouse can be representative of species that we both call early successional obligates or late successional obligates. So species that require more complex, diverse forest conditions that might be typically associated with with late successional forests. We're also seeing declines in those species as well. And so, with the next slide, you can see that this is our age class distribution of all national forest units in the Southern Appalachians, according to FSVEG data. This was done pre-Helene, so we are going to see some shifting here, but you can see that there's this big clump of forest age classes between roughly 80 and 130 years old. That is most of our forests down here. And so with that, we see species that are more generalists doing okay, and they have sort of closed canopy forests where they're hanging out and doing just fine. But we see on the two ends of the spectrum, so species like ruff grouse, golden wing warbler, American woodcock, more of our early successional obligates, they're declining, and then our wood thrush, cerulean warbler, they're more of our late successional obligates, also declining. And so we see that while there's a correlation here and things aren't looking as good on both ends of the spectrum, which is why we need diverse forests. Um, there are other factors at play, but this is a concerning trend that we have the amount of mature forest on the landscape. You can go to the next slide, Ben. And so what we find now when you look out over the Blue Ridge Mountains, you see a lot of nice hiking trails, shaded, beautiful places to recreate. However, they're single age forests and they're more susceptible to things like disease, invasive species, and they lack a lot of the protective cover and food that a number of wildlife depend on. And so what we're trying to do is move it more toward what we see on the right side of the screen, which are more diverse forests with more age class diversity and more structural diversity. And as I mentioned before, the ways that we're doing that is by working across our states, across private, state, and federal lands, working with agencies and private landowners to implement projects at scale to move the needle. And so we can get into a little bit of what we're doing across our states. I'll turn things over to Ben, and he can talk a little bit about what we're doing in states where he's active, and I will chip in as well. We're not going to get into everything today just because we want to leave some time for questions and getting into other topics, but thought we would just give folks a sense of what's going on across the region. So I'll turn it over to Ben.
All right, can do. So, as Sean mentioned, up until earlier this year, I was actually our Kentucky Forest Wildlife Specialist, our forester for the state of Kentucky. So that's still where I'm based, still near and dear to my heart. And so we'll kick it off with what is currently my home state. So, in Kentucky, we work across all lands. The land Sean mentioned, state, federal, and private. Not all states are like that, but Kentucky is. So, on the federal side, which is what you see pictured here, we work with the Daniel Boone National Forest in particular, and a lot of that work is centered around stewardship agreements, which we'll talk about in much greater detail later. But essentially, it is a very localized project with a bunch of different moving parts, all focused on creating the best possible habitat within a focal landscape. And so that's a huge part of our work with the Daniel Boone National Forest. We also have several other projects on the Daniel Boone. For example, exploring some more advanced harvesting techniques to be able to work on rougher terrain with lower impacts than our current techniques use, as well as a couple of standalone agreements that are working on pretty large scales to improve the health of the forests. So all told, I believe we have between 2,000 and 3,000 acres of projects on the Daniel Boone that are in some stage of completion, including a couple that are ongoing right now, totaling about 1,000 acres, 1,500 acres, somewhere in there. So a lot of work going on federal lands in Kentucky. We also have work on state lands. We work with the Kentucky Division of Forestry and Kentucky Fish and Wildlife as well to implement projects on state forests as well as state WMAs and hunter access areas, including a timber harvest that's just wrapping up at Kentucky Ridge State Forest that we're going to follow up with some post-harvest management to really make the best possible habitat in that area. Then on private lands, a lot of the work we do is in partnership with USDA NRCS, for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And the big goal of that is to provide private landowners with professional quality forest management planning at no cost to the landowner, and then hopefully to set them up with NRCS cost share to help them actually implement these forest management plans that we write. And once again, we'll talk about that a lot more a little bit later in the presentation. Moving on to Tennessee, this is another state where we work on all lands, state, federal, and private. It looks pretty similar to Kentucky in terms of the suite of projects. So once again, we have work on federal lands focusing on the Cherokee National Forest, including what you see on the screen there, the Double G timber sale, as well as a couple of other standalone agreements that are once again focused on a very similar idea of improving the national forest, forest health, and forest composition, habitat diversity at meaningful scale. So once again, a couple thousand acres of projects in some stage of completion on the Cherokee. We also work on state lands in Tennessee, and we have a bunch of really exciting projects there. A lot of that is working with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. And probably one of the highlights there is that we have been able to sort of pioneer late successional habitat management. And so a lot of the times when we think about forest management, we are thinking about, essentially early successional habitat management. But As Sean mentioned, there's work to be done on both ends of the forest age class spectrum, and so we've helped to pioneer some work to do active management to sort of accelerate the forest development towards late successional habitat conditions that will benefit a whole suite of forest wildlife species. And then on private lands, we have, very similar to Kentucky, our forest management planning service for private landowners alongside NRCS. In Virginia, we do some work on private lands, but we focus a lot more on state and federal lands. And Sean's the expert on the federal side in Virginia, so I'll leave that to him. But on the state side, we have a really heavy focus on um, wildlife management areas and state forests, all centered around the DFRB framework. And so, those of you who have been on for earlier sessions today, I'm sure heard the term DFRB many times. But for those just jumping on for the Southern Apps, DFRB stands for Dynamic Forest Restoration Block. And essentially, it is a landscape scale planning tool that we use to organize the various efforts of different partner organizations across different land holdings within a focal geography to get everybody aligned behind strong science-based management strategies that will help us push towards a unified goal of better forest health and habitat diversity across these landscapes. And again, those are really centered on WMAs and state forests in Southwest Virginia. So we have Clinch Mountain WMA, Gathright WMA, Channel State Forest, Hidden Valley WMA, Big Survey WMA, Crooked Creek WMA, and I'm sure that I've missed at least one. So we have a whole suite of state-owned lands as well as adjacent private landowner lands and NGO, nonprofit-owned lands, all sort of working together towards these DFRB management goals. And that just about covers the state land side of things. So I will turn it over to you, Sean, for the federal lands.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So on the federal side of things, we are working with the Jefferson National Forest, the GWJEF. On the Jefferson, we're working across the South Zone. So primarily the three districts of the Eastern Divide, the Mount Rogers, and the Clinch Ranger District. And so we are working with them. We have a shared partner forester position working on planning and implementing projects, anything from helping them with NEPA planning to actual non-commercial work or commercial work. We're also active on the Glen Ped Ranger District. So we just finished cutting the first unit of the Shady Mountain timber sale, which is near Natural Bridge, Virginia. And we're looking to hopefully expand on those efforts. One thing I will say about Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina, the market situation continues to be a struggle in these areas. We've had more success on Gathright, for example, as you're seeing here on the screen. That's in the Covington sourcing radius. The West Rock Mill is still pretty active there. As you get down into deeper parts of Southwest Virginia, and in Western North Carolina, we've obviously seen major market shifts and challenges. And so I think that's just an honest overview of where some of our work is in these areas. It can be a challenge due to the market limitations, and that's something we're eager to try to help contribute to, but it's a very complex issue. And so I'd be remiss to not mention the market challenges that we face in the Southern Apps. Some states are better than others, some areas within states are better than others, but generally it's a big challenge and it's got to be on our radar to do meaningful management. All that's to say, I think there's a lot of other exciting stuff still occurring. in Virginia, and so we've had a lot of good success there on state and federal lands with two active foresters in that area. Ben, we can shift things over to the next slide. I can talk a little bit about Georgia. So primarily working in northern Georgia with the Chattahoochee National Forest. We have Dan down there, who's our forest wildlife specialist. He's in a partner position with the Chattahoochee and Georgia Department of Natural Resources. So working again on planning and implementation. This is a picture of a mid-story removal contract that Dan oversaw late summer. So essentially just removing some of the undesirable trees with low wildlife value in the mid-story to try to promote better oak regeneration. So that's an example of a mid-story removal, but Dan's been great helping out on the planning and implementation side, as I said, also helping DNR with drumming surveys in the spring, and continuing to feed that data into University of Georgia for continued grouse research. We know that Northeast Georgia is where our birds are most sparse these days in the Southern Apps, and so continuing to do work and also gather data is increasingly important as we try to understand trends over time. You can go to the next slide, Ben. In South Carolina, we're just getting started in South Carolina, so we're doing some work with the Andrew Pickens Ranger District on the Sumter National Forest. And then we also have a new private lands forester as well in South Carolina. So just getting things off the ground, we are doing one of the dynamic forest restoration block uh, type things, as Ben mentioned, in this area. So in the upstate of South Carolina, looking at doing some cross boundary management across agencies to try to move the needle there. And then also working with NRCS with our private lands forester to bring private landowners in around that area to try to create more cohesive habitat. And then finally, for North Carolina, we have things moving on private, state, and federal lands. So this is a picture of Roaring Creek, the Roaring Creek Tract, Pisgah Game Land in Avery County, North Carolina, where we just finished up some patch cuts at 4 to 5 thousand feet. So some high elevation work there going on, non-commercial, but I think it'll be really good, have some good results. So we did that in collaboration with North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and are working together on additional work across the high country game lands in a new agreement we just signed with them. Our initial efforts were focused on this Roaring Creek Tract and Cold Mountain game lands in Haywood County, but now transitioning to do some additional work on state lands, all the way up to Pond Mountain down to Cold Mountain. So pretty good coverage area. Looking forward to continuing to work with them on that. And then on the Pisgah National Forest, active contract now, doing some of these patch cuts as well, along with some crop tree release. And on the Nantahala, we're also doing some crop tree release and mid-story, couple contracts. One just finished up and the other was done late summer. So things are moving along on our national forests. There's also obviously the whole Helene impact with Western North Carolina and many of our other states, which I'll get into later. But that's what's going on the federal side of things. And then on private lands, we've got Cooper working as an NRCS partner forester to help people with forest management planning, as Ben mentioned. So that's continued to be a good program in North Carolina, and looking forward to continuing to work with private landowners in North Carolina. I will pause there. I know we've kind of given a long lecture here. So, Carl, are there any questions or anything we want to address before we move on to the next phase of this?
Well, you guys, you're right. You've covered a lot of ground, and it's been awesome. There's a tremendous amount of great work happening in the Southern Apps. In terms of questions, we do not have any at the moment. We've got a few folks just sending greetings from various places within your footprint. But no, I think, if folks have questions, please throw those in the chat. Or actually, I stand corrected. We just had one pop in. Here we go. So this is from Angelo Biviano. Thank you for the question. What are the specific market challenges Sean referred to for timber sales in the Southern Apps?
So the main one is the pulpwood markets. Pulpwood or our small diameter, low grade wood, those are important for us when we're thinking about forest management because you want to make sure when you're going into an area to do a harvest that that pulpwood is removed. And so if it doesn't have commercial value, it's hard to get a logger to go in there and take it out on their own dime. And so traditionally, we've had pulpwood processing facilities that are making paper and boxes and other things. We saw that in Western North Carolina, one of the largest pulp mills in the region closed down in like later 2023. Uh, that has had ripple effects across the region. That specific mill was sourcing um, pulp from all over the region. And so when that went out, we've had continued challenges and we've seen that pulpwood markets continue to decline with the closure of facilities. A lot of it comes down to business decisions where working in the mountains, access isn't always great. It's hard to kind of logistically justify moving this wood for some companies, and so they are moving elsewhere. They're sourcing from overseas, and so the pulp challenge remains a big issue. I think there's also the threat of what tariffs will do to our saw timber markets. A good chunk of our saw timber goes overseas to make things like furniture and other things that people like in other countries. And so tariffs can disrupt that trade. Um, but I would say we're still hanging on in several states. And then finally, with the Helene blowdown, so all of the down timber, we had roughly 800,000 acres of vegetation loss in western North Carolina from Hurricane Helene. So a lot of mills are at capacity with salvage. So as the national forests and private landowners try to recover some of that wood that was blown down, we see saturation of the markets. Some of that wood will not be salvageable for that much longer, and so I think that's going to change with time. But I think really the biggest challenge for us is pulpwood markets and utilization for low grade, small diameter wood. Anything I missed, Ben?
No, that pretty well covers it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Angela, thanks for that question. We've got a couple more that have jumped in here. So next up, do the forest management plans you write for private landowners qualify for the PUV, which I'm assuming they're talking present use value at county tax offices?
Yeah, so I'm not a tax expert. I am unsure. My very cursory understanding of PUV would suggest that at least for some of the forest management plan activities, that would be a possibility. I believe PUV is, I believe, meant to help out agricultural producers and timber producers. And so a a forest management plan that's included timber production that I assume would qualify for PUB. However, I'm not a tax expert, so I am
Consult
not
with a
sure on the
tax professional.
specifics. Yeah.
Your understanding aligns with mine, Ben. And that was from Ryan Luckadoo. Ryan, thank you for your question. And we've got another one from Charles Piercy. Are there maps that show good ruffed grouse habitat in national forests? Yes, I've got a gazetteer over here that has a lot of places circled, and I'm willing to open that up for bidding, starting at $100,000 for Giving Tuesday. Any takers? Let's go. Joking aside, gentlemen, any response you'd like to offer to Charles?
Yeah, so great question, Charles. I think one thing that we want to do in the Southern Apps is create a map of all our projects. If you go on our regional page now, you can see where we're doing projects generally. But it would be good, I think, for our members to get a GIS map basically of where we doing these projects and where we improving things. When it comes to just broader, I guess like we're a drop in the bucket, right, of everything that's going on across national forests. So your best resource is also going to probably be Onyx, which you might be familiar with. It's an app where you can basically track boundaries. It's GPS, and on that, there's a layer that has timber harvests that have occurred. And so, if you pull that up and just sort of look around, you can see the years where timber harvests have occurred. And so, that is a good resource. You might already use it. I might be sharing information that everyone on this call already knows, but it's a great map layer. And if you're looking for ideal habitat, probably 10 to 15-year-old cuts in relatively high elevation areas are going to be a good place to start to look for some potential hunting spots. So that would be my suggestion for more of like a publicly available resource. And I think that's probably your best bet. Ben, Carl, anything else that could be good?
That about sums it up as far as the resources I'm aware of. Whenever we do a DFRB plan, we do incorporate some mapping and modeling, but that isn't national forest wide. So
Yeah. And the other thing you could do is just do some like e-scouting. So like on state lands, you're not gonna see that same layer for where harvests have occurred. But if you go on Google Earth or something with high resolution imagery, you can look at the landscape and you can see like if you went over Roaring Creek and there was updated imagery, this image would come up because you'd see that it had been cut. Or if there was maybe a 10-year-old cut, you'd see that the trees were slightly lower. So that's another strategy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sean, I think you nailed it. And I would just underscore Onyx is a great tool, also a corporate partner of RGS and AWS. So we're very grateful for that collaboration, that relationship with Onyx. And I'm just looking right now on my own cell phone here at some of the relevant layers. They do have a grouse specific and woodcock specific habitat layer. They also have the timber cuts layer that Sean mentioned with the timestamp of when these different vegetation management activities occurred. They also have deciduous versus coniferous. They have a young aspen forest layer that I use a lot when I'm scoping out grouse and woodcock country in new places. Everything from soils, wetlands. If you're looking for, acorn producing oaks, there's a layer for that. So great tool. I used to go to the county forest offices and get the maps of recent and historical timber harvest activity, and I think the availability of those data in a digital format has kind of negated the need for that kind of hustling on the side. I think Onyx is probably the best tool going for that.
Yeah. And it looks like there's some activity in the chat too
Yeah,
about Virginia DWR and some resources available there as well. So that's
awesome.
an option as well.
I like Angelo with the boot leather. Like, get out there and tromp around. Figure it out, man. Strap on those boots. Scope it out. Find
I like
yourself a little new home.
Eric's comment about FSC pulpwood
Mm,
and being FSC certified for the Covington mill. That's a really useful piece of information.
mm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, we're closing in on the top of the hour. Certainly want to continue to invite any last questions or comments here in the chat. Also, we'll keep directing attention to our link embedded here to drive you towards upping your membership, new memberships for friends and family as we approach the holidays. None of the work that's being highlighted by our regions, including that from our Southern Appalachian region, would be possible without the support of a whole community of folks who care about healthy forests and these amazing upland bird species and all of their co-inhabitants. So we really appreciate all of you supporting the mission and the work. Sean, Ben, anything you want to add in terms of parting thoughts or further call to action or shout outs to any of our community?
Let's see. It looks like the a new question just
Yeah,
came into the
I'm reading it.
chat.
Let's dig into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think what you're referencing is the Brood Habitat project on Clinch Mountain, um, Angelo. So yeah, that was an NWTF RGS partnership, and I know exactly where it is. And so yeah, that's an example of um, just a good collaboration with different partners. And so, yes, there's other collaborations like this in the Southern Apps, and actually on Clinch Mountain there is too. NWTF is funding some additional work at Clinch Mountain where we're doing some high elevation management, and so this is going to be another collaboration. It's with them, it's with Appalachian Mountains Joint Venture, it's with DWR, obviously, and the Nature Conservancy. So there is a lot of this happening. We can't do the work alone, so we need a lot of partners bought in on the same mission. And so we've got all the partners I just mentioned across the states where we're working. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is really critical to helping fund some of our work and wants to see a lot of good forest management happening on the ground. And so I think, yeah, in terms of your observation about grouse habitat overlapping with other game or wildlife conservation organizations or goals, uh, absolutely spot on. The grouse is a great messenger when it comes to managing for diverse forests. And managing for diverse forests is going to benefit most species. And so that's why NWTF would be interested in partnering with us. If we're doing these small patch cuts, that might be good escape cover for turkeys. It might provide good browse for deer. It might be helpful to black bears, and then all of the neotropical songbirds that would benefit from that type of structural complexity. So there's a lot that goes into this stuff, and I think working with partners is a super big piece of the puzzle.
Angela, appreciate the question and thank you for being here today. And that goes for all of you. as we close in here on the top of the hour, we are going to be shifting gears here very shortly and transitioning a little bit north and a little bit east to hear from some of our colleagues in the Northeast region. And as a reminder for folks, we still have 3 more sessions remaining. I mentioned the Northeast region. Later on this evening, we're going to take a trip over to the Western Great Lakes and hear from John Steigerwalt. And then we're going to close out the evening with a conversation including myself and our newly minted Chief Conservation and Operations Officer, Mark Hatfield. So all of you are cordially and warmly welcome to any of those sessions. And again, we very much appreciate all of you who constitute the community. Ben, Sean, great job. Thanks for the hard work you gentlemen and the whole team in the Southern Appalachian region are doing. And I look forward to seeing what 2026 has to offer for all of us. So thanks, folks, for taking the time. Have a great day. Hopefully we'll see you on the next session for the Northeast region. Have a great Giving Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.